we have with us the fantastic team from Manga Mavericks. Welcome to the team. Welcome to the show, team. What am I doing this morning?
Well,
Still,
we are on the team, the Comics One team as well, and we're very happy to have our titles hosted on Comics One and to come on the show today. Thank you, Sarab.
thank you so much, Siddharth, for handling that. um, we're off to a good start. Obviously, I haven't had my coffee this morning. It's still 5:30 a.m. here in Sydney, but here we are talking about some amazing looking manga, beautiful storytelling, all the amazing independent manga that you can get. And yeah, we'll start with you, Siddharth. Can you please introduce yourself and tell us a bit about yourself? Um, Give us a background on what got you started into comics, manga, whatever your passion is, and yeah, how did we get here? Tell us your origin story.
Absolutely. Happy to. I'm Siddharth. I am known online as Slum Ramayasha. I am the co-creator of the Manga Mavericks podcast and brand, and then I serve as operations director for Manga Mavericks Books, our manga publisher, where we license, localize, and distribute amazing works from independent manga creators and spread them to audiences worldwide. And we launched Manga Arts Books last year. The Manga Arts podcast has been going on since 2016. We're actually celebrating our 10th anniversary. In fact, the 10th anniversary date was last week on January 27th. So it's an
Wow.
exciting time for us to just think of when I started this podcast. I was a fresh 20-year-old. And so, really, Manga Mavericks has defined my 20s. And it's amazing to look back at this past decade where we started Manga Mavericks on the site called allcomic.com, and when they were looking for new manga contributors, both reviewers and podcasters, I had an interest in doing more manga reviews for a professional media outlet. I had done manga and anime reviews on forums, namely the Animation Revelation forums, for a number of years. I always loved to write about the manga that I was reading, and I had a huge passion for manga ever since I was introduced to manga and anime. Back in 2005 really is when I really got into it, when I fell in love with Dragon Ball, which had a huge influence on me and my life, but just also artistically, it was a huge influence on me as like an artist as I went into animation in my undergrad. I did a BFA in animation at the School of Visual Arts, and so I was still in college at the time. But I was still writing manga reviews and anime reviews for Animation Revelation, and then All Comic put this call out for new contributors, and I submitted an interest to do reviews and podcasts for them. And coincidentally, my co-host Colton, he also expressed interest in doing a podcast with All Comic, and Colton and I had met before on Colton's Gintama podcast. I had just recorded my first podcast ever with him, guesting on his show to talk about one arc of Gintama just a month prior. So we'd already known each other. We got connected, and we started thinking about what kind of manga podcasts weren't out there in the space. And rather than do just a review show, we really wanted to take a broader look at what was going on in the industry, report on news and discussion topics of what was happening in the community. And so that's how Manga Mavericks really got off the ground, as a podcast dedicated to discussing manga as both a medium and as an industry. And over the years, we continued to grow the scope of the show. We invited on other people who are commenters and critics in the manga and anime space, but also people who work in manga itself, people who work in manga localization as translators, editors, letterers. We had other comic artists and manga creators on the show as well. and we continue to evolve our guest pool and talk about a lot of different series and topics and shine a spotlight in different aspects of process, like how simulpubs are done. We did an amazing roundtable with 6 letterers to talk about the craft of lettering, and we talked about a variety of like different topics about like representation in the community, and just under discussed genres and series. And so yeah, we had, just a great um it, a wealth of like connections and experiences that we built up through doing the show, learning about the manga localization process. And
Hmm.
I think all of the connections and people we met through the show, all the things we learned about how manga is published and localized overseas, really inspired us to want to give publishing manga ourselves a go, which is where I can turn the story over to Varun and Michael for how they really led the initiative to bring Manga Mavericks from the podcast and press and media space into manga publishing ourselves.
That's a beautiful segue, by the way. Over to you, Varun.
Yeah, hi. So I'm Varun. So I'm the CEO and licensing director for Manga Mavericks and Manga Mavericks Books. A little bit about my background. It's honestly starts very similar to Siddharth in that, like, since we grew up together, um, I kind of really got into manga by going to local libraries and Barnes and Nobles and bookstores with Siddharth. And I was also pretty much looking at a lot of the same manga they were looking at, Dragon Ball, Naruto, One Piece. And that got me like really invested in kind of just like manga stories and just all the different like cool and interesting concepts and characters that are out there in manga. Around when I was in high school, though, is I think when I got really serious about it, in that like um we started like actively collecting a lot of manga, and it kind of became my interest to find like a lot of like very niche out of print manga and like kind of build up our collections with like just a treasure trove of like manga that maybe have been kind of underrepresented, forgotten. um and eventually we just kind of had like thousands of volumes of manga in our home, to the point that it's just basically a manga library at this point. um
Wow.
Yeah. I was in particular
That's a
inspired. I wanted to collect 1,000 manga volumes because of Jason Thompson's column on Anime News Network, House of 1,000 Manga. And so that was a
whoa.
formative, like, column for me reading it when I was in middle school, high school, in terms of learning about different manga, classic manga, and manga outside of like what I was being introduced to through anime or at my library. And so I what got interest in like collecting, but also with a goal of like, hey, I want to collect 1,000 manga one day, which is a goal I started seriously pursuing when I went off to college and then had access to robust bookstores in New York and then looked on eBay online for deals. And
Mm,
so we
mm.
grew from when I left for college, we had like 30 manga volumes over the course of like our childhood, and then like very quickly, by the time I graduated college, we had it far exceeded 1,000 volumes of manga, and
Wow.
I think we had 2,000 plus. I think now we have definitely like 4,000, maybe even 5,000. We stopped counting a
Wow.
long time ago, and we should probably do a recount of our library at some point.
Yeah, no, it's definitely like growing quite big. Like I have a manga shelf behind me that is a fraction, a very small fraction of what I have in my apartment, and then we still have
Wow.
thousands of books back at our original home in Minnesota. So
Mm.
it's a lot piling up. But I guess in terms of like how I got involved with Manga Mavericks, so Darth was initially like the co-creator of the podcast. Eventually, though, um, the site that we had like been hosting Manga Mavericks on was looking for additional writers, all comic. So
Mm.
I eventually kind of came on to really just talk about what I had been reading at the time, which was a lot of like different Shonen Jump titles like Demon Slayer, Hinamaru Sumo. So I kind of got my feet wet, just kind of writing about manga like that, and that got me a few different opportunities to kind of just like build connections with manga publishers, interview a few creators, have us start going to conventions across the US as like press and journalists, and really kind of just build out our network that we had already had like a very strong foundation of with the podcast, but just like more further as well with that, with like kind of the marketing and PR side with publishers and really kind of like building the relationship even further. Um Around I believe 2022, the person that had owned the website we were hosting Manga Mavericks on, basically offered to sell the website to me. And at the time, I was in a very strong financial position, and like I felt like there was a lot more we could do with Manga Mavericks if we kind of
Hmm.
owned the entire platform. So
Hmm.
I made the impulse decision to just like, okay, I'm just gonna buy this. um, and
That's
I basically
amazing.
like I wasn't even at home at the time. I was on a trip in Japan with Michael. Um and then I just texted back Siddhartha like, "Oh yeah, I bought the website."
Wow, that's
um
amazing. But you
yeah,
did being in Japan affect that decision? Were you already like, was it at the back of your mind, in some shape or form?
a little bit in that like for a while I felt like I really thought there were a lot of ways we could scale Manga Mavericks. And at the time too, I was hoping a lot with Amazon Prime Video with their launch of anime, specifically
Mm,
on Look Back and Magilumiere, which were like the first like two major anime titles Amazon had released in like years globally. Um, so around that time, I was kind of talking a lot more to like people that were more heavily involved on with anime and manga, and I kind of realized that okay, not only myself but Siddharth and Michael, we have a very strong foundation of knowledge and trust that is very difficult to get in really any industry. I was like, okay, I
mm,
think we should capitalize on that. We shouldn't just like sleep on these talents that we have or the skill that we've gained. Um, so when the opportunity came to buy the site, I was like, okay, this is. I feel like this is a no-brainer. In
yeah,
retrospect, it was something I probably should have thought about more because there are a lot of things we had to do on the side from a technical end. I had to bring in one of my friends to basically completely like restructure the back end of our website because it was kind of a mess.
yeah,
Um,
yeah,
but I think in the long run it was a great decision, and I think that's kind of what around that time was kind of what planted the seed of the idea of us publishing manga. Um, so the initial time this got brought up was in a Discord group chat we had with one of our other team members, Marion, and Marion was just like kind of like completely like out of it, and it was like middle of the night, but they were like, "Oh, hey, what if we just publish manga? What if we just started licensing like whatever manga we like?"
wow. That's also like a dream come true, isn't it?
Yeah, no,
Yeah.
it's something that you don't really think is very possible usually, because it sounds
I,
like a very out there idea.
I mean, a lot of this started just from us joking around because, like, it was one time when we were on our way back from, I think, NYCC, and we were just kind of like, man, if nobody's going to get the series we want, then we'll just do it. But it was a joke back
Yeah,
then until Marion kind of not peer pressured us, but sort of just said, do it then. And then we just like, I mean, it was a thing there. We kind of looked at the network we have, like Varun's like business sense. I can actually translate. We know other people that are like influencers in the sphere thanks to Sid. Um, Manga Mavericks has a very good like track record with people, so it's just like, wow, actually, why don't we just do
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah, yeah,
it?
yeah. Just makes
but that
sense.
yeah. So like that point too, we kind of like thought more about it. We're like, oh wait, yeah, maybe we can do this. So we started like talking to a few of the folks that we knew that were working in manga publishing to see like, okay, we know some of the bread and butter of how this works, but how does like you how does like it work from like when you're starting out from nothing? And we at the time we talked to our really good friend, the late Matt Hosh from Starfruit Books, who kind of came from a similar situation to us, where he didn't really come from a industry background. He was a school teacher as his full time job, and kind of just said went into manga as a passion. Um, so we kind of talked to him about like, okay, without like a traditional track record, how do you do this? And he kind of
Mm.
like basically walked us through the entire process. He also gave us essentially a template to like draft a like licensing contract in Japanese as well, which was like extremely helpful.
Mm.
Um, and when we were talking to him as well, he talked about kind of like gap areas that you can kind of cover in the market. And one thing that had gotten brought up, especially for starting out with manga publishing, is licensing indie manga. Because there
Mm.
are a ton of publishers that are doing kind of publisher based titles, but there's only a very small handful that actually work directly with Japanese creators in the English market. Usually, you're always going
Mm.
through a publisher or a literary agent. And because of that, there's a lot of amazing manga out there that don't really get noticed because it falls outside of that traditional process that
Mm.
publishers will go through to license a work. Which makes it a very big opportunity to kind of just license in English. Um, so I went to Japan again for I believe at the time a business trip for Amazon. And I had met one of our now business partners and friends, Victoria Esnard, who is basically the person that runs Red String Manga, which is a kind of small publisher and localization provider for a lot of Yuri artists in Japan, Girls Love, as well as like a few different other like LGBTQ like manga as well that they release. And she had brought up
Mm.
the idea of like, okay, if you want to aim at indie manga, let's go to Comidia. Um, and then what Comidia is like a kind of Comic Con in Japan, except it's focused solely on indie manga artists. Like, imagine
Mm.
you had an artist alley, but it's all kind of manga and art book focus, and it's all original IP. Like, the
Mm.
key policy they have is that you can't do anything derivative, which is kind of what separates it from, say, Comic Cat, which is the more like a I think globally recognized comic event in Japan. But Comidia has kind of
Mm.
become the stomping ground for a lot of Japanese publishers to scout talent. So for instance, like say the creator of Delicious and Dungeon, they had a lot of like experience selling their work at Comidia before they started working for Katakawa.
Mm.
And there's a few other artists in similar positions to that where Comedia basically was their starting point because of it being a place where you can really release whatever you want that is from your own creation.
Mm.
So around February of last year, I decided to go to a Comedia event in Tokyo, and I basically came back with like around like an entire suitcase worth of books. I think it was like probably like 100 different manga that I brought back.
Mm.
And then I sat down with Michael and we went one by one through all the books and we were deciding like, okay, this one looks interesting. This one doesn't look interesting. This one seems like has potential. And then we kind of
Wow.
shortlisted a long list of people to reach out to from that list of books. And then just started cold emailing.
Wow. That's fantastic.
Yeah.
Wow.
And it was a very interesting process to try to like contact a creator the first time because you don't really have a track record at that point. So we had to kind of explain more about what our company has been before and then who we're working with, because we were already working with like a lot of talented localizers at that point, and we kind of just showed examples of like the work they did and like, okay, this is the quality of work you can expect. But it's also like a
Mm.
very big leap of trust
Yeah,
To
yeah,
like
yeah.
trust someone that's just essentially a new publisher. We hadn't even printed a book at that point.
Yeah.
But after like a bunch of emails, we finally got a few callbacks. And actually, the first one that ever got signed as a license was Bonds by Zenzo. Zenzo was like very eager
Wow.
to release their work in English, and they're like, okay, yeah,
Mm,
let's do this. Um,
mm,
and I think once we got a few under our belt, it's become a lot easier because now the
mm.
word is kind of spread around that we like are like English publishers. So even now, when Michael and I have went to Japan, like a few of the artists were interested. Are like, oh yeah, I follow you on Twitter, or like I think I've heard about you before from another artist. Um, but yeah, it's scaled up very quickly, which is terrifying. But um, I guess I've been talking for a while. But Michael, do you want to talk a little bit about yourself?
Oh yeah, sure. So I'm like the dinosaur of the group. I've been watching anime since like the '90s. Um, so like I guess my whole thing started with Dragon Ball, Sailor Moon, the Toei classics. Um, but I didn't know I didn't know what anime was until Pokemon came out, and then I just got really obsessed with it. That was my special interest for a while, and I
Mm.
happened to use Babelfish. That's how old I am. I used Babelfish on a Japanese website, and I saw that they were like 100 episodes ahead of us, and I'm like, that doesn't make
Wow.
sense. America made Pokemon. How are they ahead? And then it dawned on me,
Yeah.
like, oh, huh, they made Pokemon. So, but yeah, and I happened in high school to get like for a Japanese version of one of the games, Pokemon Silver, and I just fell in love with it, even though I couldn't read it. I didn't understand. So I took like a sheet and wrote down a bunch of Japanese to see if I can get through the game. But that was kind of like a fleeting thing. And then eventually, this was before Crunchyroll, I got really into this manga and anime series called The Law of Ueki by Tsubasa Fukuchi. And back then, fan subs were just what college students did in their free time. So there was definitely that
Mm,
gap again where it was kind of like Japan would be on episode 30 and we'd be just getting episode 5 out fan
mm,
subbed. So I was just like, no, I need to know what happens to Eki next. So I went to Kinokuniya, figured out where the anime was, and then just bought the rest of the series, so volumes 9 through 16. And I took a Japanese dictionary and just went through each volume and just looked up every word. And eventually I
wow.
just got to a point where I was just like, okay, then at that point, yeah, I just really got into like manga and anime. And eventually I started learning more about manga culture in the sense of like, I mean, what's popular worldwide now is Shonen Jump. But then
Mm,
when one day, eventually I found out Ueki ran in this magazine called Shonen Sunday. And I was just like,
mm,
huh. Oh, so everything is not just, One Piece, Naruto, and Bleach are from one publisher. You have Inuyasha and Detective Conan. They're from Shogakukan who do Shonen Sunday. So I'm like, oh, Inuyasha and Detective Conan are in the same magazine, and that's where Ueki was. Um, so then at one point I just was online. I mean, I had social media, and I was just kind of like, huh. Well, I found the site that would actually let you buy Shonen Sunday as it came out in Japan for like I think it was like $300 a year. Um,
yeah.
so I bought, and they would deliver the magazine to your place, and like I was like, oh, I just said online I can read Japanese, and nobody's talking about Shonen Sunday. Does
Mm,
anybody want to hear me talk about Shonen Sunday? And I got a huge response from people just being interested because again, the culture was really centered around Shonen Jump. So it was just
mm,
like people for a longest time, you would definitely see people being like, "Oh, like when's the next chapter of Inuyasha going to come out in Shonen Jump?" Or why is Fairy Tail like the big Shonen Jump hits are One Piece, Fairy Tail, and it's like no, like those don't run in the same magazine at all. So, um, I felt like so I just started like and I'm going to take a bit of pride in this saying this. Like there are a lot of now you go on Twitter and all these social media, you'll see like these websites now that do a lot of manga news or are based on a
mm.
magazine or a publisher. I was the first one to do it. So like way
That's
back in
fantastic.
2017,
Yeah.
So I'm about to come up on we're about to come up on our 10-year anniversary. So then at that point I
Mm.
just started reading all of Shonen Sunday. So my whole thing was to recreate the experience of reading the magazine as if you're in Japan. You go to 7-Eleven, pick up the magazine and flip through it. I wanted to recreate that. So it wasn't like I was just saying, "Oh, this manga's cool," or "that manga looks interesting." I know I went like even the giveaways that they do in the magazine, I would talk about those, like the cafes, the all of the little events that are going on in Japan. Sure, you can't really go to them or anything unless you're in Japan, but I'm like that's part of
Mm.
the experience of reading one of these magazines.
Mm.
So,
Mm.
and eventually I started Twitter, and yeah, from there it's been 10 years of just reviewing manga, talking to artists and stuff, like because eventually like it started off as a hobby, and I mean like this is where Varun and Sid kind of come in and get involved, because like one day for Anime Expo they let me know about press, and I'm just like, I'm just running a little hobby site, nobody's gonna let me into a con for this. And then Varun was just kind of like, do it, the worst thing they could say is no. And they
Yeah.
did, and I actually
Very
got
true.
into Anime Expo just off base of
Whoa.
my little like blog of like 200, probably 200 followers at that point. So I was just like, okay,
Yeah.
maybe I'm not being paid for this, but maybe I could take this a little more seriously. And I remember one day, like, I mean, obviously this is the thing I do for myself, but then one day, I don't know, like, I don't know what happened exactly, but a bunch of French people were really like, thanks for all the work you do. Like, we really love the site. Like, not many
Wow.
people talk about Shogakukan. And yeah, it just was like, it just started getting to a point where just like the constant coverage I do, like, actually got me involved with the artists themselves. Like, just one funny story that happened was like there was this one series. So I'm following a bunch of Shogakukan like sites, not just the shonen, the shojo, the seinen, the josei. So I'm following all of them just to get news and talk about it. And there was one manga that they like, this shojo manga, shojo comic was gonna put out soon. It was called Magical Girl Dandelion, and they just
Mm.
had a preview image of it, of just like the two main characters. And I was like, oh, this is cool. And I tweeted it just saying, hey, this series is gonna start soon. Um, it's a magical girl buddy, kind of not a buddy, kind of like demon hunting thing. And I was just like, yeah, it looks cool. I look forward to when it came out. It went super viral. And keep in mind, the manga
Wow.
hasn't even started yet. So the mangaka is getting fan art of her characters of a series that hasn't started in Japan yet. And so I just kind of
It's
I just
crazy.
kind of asked her, hey, would you mind if I slipped into the one of the comments and was like, do you mind if we interview you? And she was open to it. We did the interview. That went viral as well. And then eventually Viz got it. So now it's like, and
Wow.
when the first volume came out in Japan, I mean, obviously they're not going to credit me, and that's fine. But when the first volume came out in Japan, I was like, this is the fastest a shoujo manga has ever gone viral in history. So,
Wow.
and I feel like, man, I guess I had something to do with that. But like, and that's the kind of thing that through running this website, I've learned so much about just the manga industry. And now Shogakukan, the people that I've like basically looked up to for the last decade and more, like when it's the kind of thing now that I can just kind of talk to them. Like we've got interviews with like the editor in chief of Koro Koro Comics. They're the ones that do the Pokemon manga, so it came full circle, sort of. Of they do the Pokemon manga. I've talked to several artists besides Kairu Mizuho Sensei, who did Magical Girl Dandelion. We did an interview with the Snowball Earth author, the author of Wash It
Mm.
All Away. I did for another outlet, Mitsuru Hattori Sensei, Doku Doku Mori Mori, which what's I forgot the English version title of that, but we did an interview with them, and this just I think it's just the spirit of Manga Mavericks, where it's just the kind of thing where we just kind of just say, "Hey, why not? Let's see what'll happen." The worst thing is
Mm.
that we say
Yeah.
no, because like it was definitely for Rune. Like the Koichi Kobayashi interview just came from me essentially. He like followed me on LinkedIn. I was like, "Oh, dude, this is the editor in chief for Korokoro," and Varun was just like, "Interview him." And he said yes.
Wow.
It's just a thing now with Shogakukan, they're familiar with me to the point where it's like, yeah, as Varun mentioned, we could go to meetings in Japan and they just already know me. to the point that TMS, the animators of Detective Conan, we were at like a convention, and I
Mm.
went to, they had their American branch there, and I just went over to them to just kind of say, hey, because obviously Detective Conan, if every magazine has their ace, if One Piece is the ace, or well, at this point maybe JJK is more appropriate, but like if every
Yeah.
magazine has their ace, Detective Conan is Shonen Sunday's ace.
Mm.
And so I just going to introduce myself and just say, yeah, we're big Conan fans. We have talked about Conan. They're like, yeah, no, we already know you. We've already we talk about you all the time in our offices, and we know about you. So it's just really that kind of like I'm just really grateful to be in the space I'm in. I mean, as far as Manga
Mm.
Mavericks, again, it was
Mm.
just a thing where Varun and I both just came together and said, yeah, let's totally do this. Our pipeline is like he said, he would get the manga, I'll read through it. We just went back to Comedia in November, came back with another huge suitcase, and are just flipping through manga to kind of see which ones it is. Since I'm able to read it, I'm able to get like a better idea beyond the art of, okay, this is something that we should go for. And now we're at a point that we've announced our first publisher manga, and I'm translating that.
Wow.
So, and that translation has been finished as of yesterday. So, it's just, I never thought, just coming back to today, I never thought I always have just been kind of manga adjacent, or I'm like, people know I like manga, and I talk to some people in the industry, but I've never thought about myself of becoming an official translator or working with official publisher, and now it's happening.
Mm.
And
Mm.
it's just such a, I think it just goes to show, don't let your dreams be trees.
Yeah, if there's one lesson from our story, it's really is to just shoot your shot. Just like put out there into the world like
Yep.
what you're passionate about and take chances and see where it leads you. I like when we
Yeah.
started this podcast, when I started the podcast, I didn't think that we'd grow into a media outlet and then we'd become a manga publisher. But here we are 10 years later, and it's all because of like, just putting ourselves out there, meeting people, learning, and then just going for it. Just like having a dream, a desire, a want to do something, and then just acting on it. And so
Yeah.
it's just been like kind of amazing journey that we've been on through the past 10 years.
No, I absolutely love that because that's how we also got started. It's exactly the same thing. What's the worst that could happen, Like creators would say no, yeah, let's just go for it. Put ourselves out there. That's it. It's amazing. Fantastic. And now you guys have fans of of your books, the books that you publish, the brand itself. I've spoken to so many people who already know about your brand from all across the US. There's obviously uh, the artwork and the lovely work that you guys do is already being noticed. So kudos on doing that. You know, taking that first step.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Awesome. I have to. So this is probably a silly question that just crossed my mind. Um, which let's uh, tell people about one manga that has led you to an anime, and an anime that has led to a manga, um, and you love both. So do you want to start let's start with Michael this time, and then we'll go to Varun and Siddharth.
Oh, so like you mean an anime that I viewed that led me to go read the manga version, and
Yeah.
ended up enjoy. Okay, I mean, well, again, Log Wiki. I like didn't know anything about it. Like it was one of those things that came on in April 2005. Yeah, I keep dating myself. Uh, and I didn't know anything about it. It just like it's about a kid who can turn trash into trees, and he goes into like this huge tournament of gods essentially. And I was like, I watched episode one, and I'm just like, okay, this seems funny. And by the time like I got to episode 10 or so, I was just like hooked to the point that I was just like, I can't wait for the subs that are coming out every like 2 or 3 weeks. So I ended up buying the manga, and then after that, I ended up the so by the time the anime was announced, the manga had actually finished. So and the
Oh,
author had started a sequel, which unfortunately was cut short by him becoming ill. But yeah, I ended up like reading the rest of that one, catching up with the sequel, and then I just became. Not only did I discover the anime and manga, I could discover Fukuchi. I like could attribute him to being where I am now, because I don't think I would have. Maybe I would have become a translator eventually, but he put me on the path of just being like, I love everything he does. I mean, and I'm really happy
nice.
now that Viz Media has picked up his current series, Parashoppers, that's currently running in Shonen Sunday. So, yeah, through him, I like discovered a whole author like Lavueki, Anagel Mole, Psych, all of these series. I've like fallen in love with him just because of
Mm,
just happening on Ueki one day.
amazing. Baron?
Oh, that's tough. I mean, hmm. I guess the easier way to first to go is like manga to anime. For manga to
Mm,
anime, I guess like one example for me would be like Ashita no Joe, Tomorrow's Joe, which is like my favorite manga, where I mainly just came across initially as a manga and was just really invested in that. Just because it's like a very strong underdog story. It's about like a orphan, he gets sent to prison or juvenile detention center, and like kind of learns about boxing and kind of gains like a passion to defeat his rival. And it really kind of goes into not only like the struggle of like starting from nothing, but also like how you deal with loss, how you deal with like um being pushed to your limits both physically and mentally. So it was like really like powerful story for me. And then like once I had read that, I was like, oh wow, I really want to like see how the anime turned out.
mm,
And the anime is like initially is very different in a way that it's a lot slower. It adds a lot more like scenes and details, but it's just so beautifully animated. It really kind of captured the true essence of the story. Um, and yeah, like it was one of those instances where I was like, wow, like you can really like adapt an anime and not have to do
mm,
it one to one, but it really still captures the soul and enriches the story
mm,
in a
mm,
similar way.
mm,
For the reverse, um, I guess one example is Yawada, which is by Naoki Urasawa, who was the creator of like Pluto, Monster, 20th Century Boys. Yawara though is like one of the manga he did before he became known for suspense thriller mystery stories.
mm, mm,
It's about a girl that just wants to kind of live like an ordinary life, but her grandfather really wants her to do judo, um, and make her into like an Olympian for judo.
mm,
And she keeps getting put into these situations where she's competing judo tournaments and go into all these competitions, and it's just like
mm,
a really great character story because like you really kind of sympathize with Yawara as a character, the main character, that she just kind of wants to live her life and not be like burdened by all the things that have been connected to her from by judo and like all the relationships that have been like strained because of her having to do judo. Um,
mm,
but I think like it also just has this like very kind of rich cast of characters that are both hilarious but also endearing. Um, and I think that kind of just like really drew me in because like I think that there are a lot of like sports manga that kind of get very intense in different ways, but Yawara is
mm,
never really about the intensity of the matches. It's about the intensity of what happens outside the matches. Um,
mm,
so
mm,
I think that just made it like a really enjoyable watch for me. And afterwards, like Yawara is not like translated into English, so I had to go find the Japanese volumes and read it.
ah,
And I was like, it was an interesting experience because my Japanese is not the best compared to Michael. But I'm like, okay, I really like this. I'm just gonna like try to read through this. And yeah, it
Mm,
was
mm,
equally as amazing as I'd expect from Naoki Urasawa manga.
yeah,
And it was kind of interesting. Kind of usually I read a manga and then watch the anime. I'm just that type of person usually, but it was kind of interesting doing the reverse and kind of seeing like, okay, this is how like it was originally laid out. This is why they adapted certain things this way. Um, and like yeah, it was just like a really great experience. And
yeah.
I really love that series a lot. So
Nice.
yeah.
Awesome. Siddharth?
There's a few different directions I can go with this. To go back to how Dragon Ball was like really my gateway into like getting more into anime, I got into Dragon Ball through actually Dragon Ball GT, and not even just the beginning of that, the end of that, like the last 4 episodes. I just ended
Yeah.
up getting into onto Nami. I didn't even realize it was going to end. And so when that last episode aired, I like was like taken by shock, and I was like crying for days because I was like, I just got into the show and it's already over. But then I discovered, oh, there are going to be these things called the lost episodes, aka the 16 episodes Funimation cartoons were skipped initially to get straight to the
Wow.
baby arc. So those started airing the next week. But then, I got just really into all aspects of Dragon Ball, and that included like reading the manga. And I just experienced Dragon Ball just piecemeal all over the place, like anime and
Mm,
manga. It just all jumbled up. Like I didn't go in order, just whatever I could get my hands on, I would. And I would just read whatever. And so I experienced the series like all out of order that way. But the first
wow.
volume of manga that I ever bought and I ever picked up was Dragon Ball Z Volume 18, which is the volume where Goku fights Cell, and then at the end, like Gohan turns into Super Saiyan 2. And so that was like a huge moment. And that was a learning curve to actually read manga for me, right to left, because I was like reading it, in the right like page order, but I was reading the panels still left to right. So I was a little confused of like, just the order of events. Because I got how
Yeah.
you should flip the pages, but not how you actually read the panels on the pages. But eventually I learned. But I would say that Dragon Ball is an important gateway because not only did, I read the manga from coming from the anime, but also like in those volumes, those old Shonen Jump volumes, they would have like, at the beginning under the cover, just like a list of like all the upcoming Shonen Jump volumes that Viz was going to be publishing. And so I could see like, oh, here's a whole other manga that is going to be coming out. And one of those manga at that time, when I got into Dragon Ball, was Doctor Slump. We started publishing Doctor Slump, Akira Toriyama's first manga, his breakout manga, in the spring of 2005. And I happened to
Mm,
get into Dragon Ball just in the right time to start reading Dr. Slump right as Viz was leaving to publish it. And Dr. Slump is hugely formative to me. It's so funny. Toriyama's gags and his artwork are just like impeccable in that
mm,
manga, and like his sense of paneling, his comedic timing, all of that was hugely influential to me. And so that when
yeah.
I was like drawing comics as a kid, like I really was like looking at Dr. Slump and how Toriyama was like drawing and paneling. I was trying to emulate it, and some of my OCs as a kid were like based off of Dr. Slump characters. Like I had a character who
Oh.
had like a wild, like crazy hairstyle and was like a mad scientist, like Dr. Mashirito. I had a character that was like a butt-shaped alien, much like the Nico-chans in Doctor Slump. So there were a lot of characters, a lot of ideas, and just a lot of inspiration that I really took from Doctor Slump in particular.
Mm,
As much or more so than Dragon Ball. So that was like a huge like from getting into Dragon Ball, it led me into Doctor Slump, and also it led me into a world of like just reading other manga and being aware of like other manga. And in terms of the reverse manga into anime, that is an interesting thing where I feel like because I read so many manga first now, like I inevitably like end up just, getting into series before the anime comes out, particularly with like some of the
Mm,
bigger like jump titles in the past couple of years, or I just have awareness of like what are like really notable manga right now, and I start reading them before the anime comes out and the series blows up even bigger. Delicious and Dungeon was like that, where I was reading that like before it was licensed. I just happened to discover it like very early on and get into it. So I was like, one of a very select few people who are like reading that series before like it's now huge. It really has exploded, but
mm,
that was memorable. But I think the one I want to go with is like my favorite series, Yurusei Yatsura, because this is like it's sort of circular where I discovered the manga because of the anime opening. I just happened to stumble upon it on YouTube. But I started reading the manga because I realized, oh, this is from the creator of Ranma Half. It's her first manga, Yurusei
ah,
Yatsura, a classic sci-fi rom-com about this uh boy with terrible luck and just an absolute like lech who is roped into accidentally uh getting engaged to this alien Oni princess who electrocutes him whenever he's unfaithful. So I started reading the manga for that. As opposed to watching the anime, but like after I got into the manga, I then checked out the anime, and that really led to a deep appreciation for the work of Mamoru Oshii, who is the director of the first half of the Urusei anime. And so the Urusei anime is so interesting in the adaptation because like Oshii puts so much of his own stamp on the material in terms of like adding different types of humor than the style of humor Takahashi had, in terms of like she had a sense of gags and character based humor in her manga, and then Oshii added more pop culture references and kind of satirical humor in the anime. And then there were experimental episodes that the series did throughout its run
mm,
that showed his
mm,
interest in more philosophical themes that would be more extrapolated upon in his films. And so with Yurusei Yatsura, I became really interested in Oshii's filmography as a director, and so then from there I watched Pat Glibber. I think that's I was into Ghost in the Shell Standalone Complex, but I really discovered the original Ghost in the Shell film,
mm,
after getting to Yurusei Yatsura. And then yeah, just Oshii's like utter body of work and really getting into him as a director, from like being a fan of Yurusei first, and then like
mm,
getting an appreciation for Oshii as a director from his work on the Yurusei anime.
mm. That's so fantastic. That's so fantastic. You know, I'll tell you a funny story about like when I first found out that there's, because I grew up in India, and I in the 90s, and we never had manga. We didn't know that existed. So when I first found out Full Metal Alchemist had manga, I just went straight up and bought it. And it turns out the version of Full Metal Alchemist I had watched had nothing to do with manga. Like the first season that came out had like it
Yeah,
diverged so
Yeah.
the
far away.
2003 series, yeah, like it takes, adapts the material for first couple of volumes, but already from the beginning it changes so much to the point where when
Yeah,
Brotherhood comes out and people are like, "Oh, the beginning of Brotherhood is so rushed. You should watch the first half of the first film Alchemist first." I'm like, "No, you can't do that because from the beginning it already changes so much and sets up plot lines and characters that aren't in the original and are only
no,
paid off in that series. So you're
yeah,
not gonna get the same story. It's a completely different story from the beginning."
yeah, yeah. That changed my world so much, and I was like, then I knew how to differentiate between the two, and like how to treat them separately, but also not to expect like them to be very similar. But then like obviously I've seen beautiful adaptations of of manga into anime as well. Yeah, that was my first gateway into manga, and it just changed my world in a big way. But the
Yeah.
second one, the Brotherhood, Full Metal Alchemist Brotherhood, does bring it closer to the books.
Oh yeah, like that's much more faithful cuz like it was coming out like just towards the end of when the manga was about to end. So they planned it in a way that it could like adapt the series, the manga story just right in time for when the manga would end. So like the last episode of Brotherhood like came out like 3 weeks after the last chapter of the manga. So they really
Uh,
planned ahead for that to like have the stories align, but they did sort of abridge some of the earlier material that is shared between like Brotherhood and the 2003 anime, but not as much as people tend to complain. It is more faithful to the manga's pacing in a lot of
yeah,
respects, though some things are
Mm,
yeah,
reordered.
yeah.
yeah, no, agreed.
Uh, awesome. Awesome. I'll do something fun this time. So I'll let you guys pick the best of your books and talk a bit about that one. So, of your catalog, which one is your favorite? Starting with you, Siddharth, uh, uh, and why? And talk a little bit about the book itself.
Alternative Self-Liner Note by Chiaki Yagura is a book that deeply resonates with me. It's one that is about a woman who's a 28-year-old musician. She's kind of struggling to make it as an artist, and she idolizes a lot of artists who burn bright at a much younger age. The under 27 club, like artists like Kurt Cobain, who grew incredibly popular, were at their prime when they passed away and died young. And she's like, well, I'm older. I've outlived the artists that I've idolized, but I am nowhere close to them as an artist. And is it even worth it for me to continue to pursue this professionally? Why am I continuing to play music? And it's a story of rediscovering your passion for
Mm,
your creative craft, for why you are doing something that brings you joy and and brings you an ability to express yourself, and is not for chasing the success of others. It's not for even the idea of being successful. It's because it is something personal to you. You are creating something, you're expressing yourself because it is your outlet. It is, as Rio discovers in the course of like just playing music and just in a fantastic sequence in the book where she just like is playing and drowning out all of these questions and doubts that are coming up in her head and just telling them to like just shut up and F off. Is the like, no, she's playing her song. She's playing
mm,
because she has something inside of her that she wants to get onto the world, and that's what
mm,
important matters to her more than anything. And I really
mm,
resonated with this book because as someone who was in their late 20s when we were publishing this. I mean, I'm just turned 30. I also look towards a lot of peers who are my age, who I feel are like way farther ahead in their careers to me in like the creative world. And I'm like thinking, I'm so far behind. There are people younger than me so much farther ahead, and like, why do I keep going with what I'm doing? And this book, I think, taps into a really great kind of a reminder of like the reason you create art is because there's something that you want to express to the world, and that's what matters more than just chasing like these other barometers of success, or like trying to chase after others and their journeys. What matters is your own journey and
mm.
what you want to express to the world through your art. So that is like alternative really resonated for me in that respects as like a creative person and someone working in creative field and like chasing dreams like as an artist. And I think that's a lot of reason why it's resonated so deeply and so vitally with our audience, and why people like have really been drawn to the book out of all of our launch titles most of all.
Mm,
So yeah,
mm,
alternative just very resonant to me. I absolutely love the book, and the art in the book is fantastic. Like the sequence where Rio, the protagonist, is playing the music, and as I described before, just the placement of the text, just like the energy of her playing her guitar, and just like the she throws it in a great multi-page like full two-page spread sequences. All of that just looks absolutely just incredible. Just so much raw
mm,
energy and emotion expressed on the
mm,
page, expressed through Yagura Sensei's line work. Just it's all fantastic. So yeah, I
mm,
highly
mm,
I think it's one that just can speak to a lot of people who may find themselves like kind of struggling or crossroads in their life, and like just in moments of self-doubt and questioning, their career paths or their creative journeys, and then just reminding them, hey, all of those doubts and questions, they don't matter. What matters is like finding what you want to express to the world through your art.
mm, mm. That's amazing. That's amazing. I think I mentioned you earlier that when we were off air, that this was the most picked up book during the convention last year, and like everybody just wanted to get it. As soon as I told them go to the digital store, they were like, "Why can't we have it? A physical copy of it." They were like, everybody wanted to buy a physical copy of it. So it's definitely like you said, it's one of the most popular titles uh, that you guys have.
Oh
Um,
yeah.
I
I
think.
mean, we got a lot of questions about that at the last con we went to. We sold out of our first print run, so we didn't have copies at the last con we tabled at, but we had a preview copy, and people who came up to the booth were like, "Oh, I'm really interested. Do you have copies for it?" So I'm like, "Yeah, we're out of stock, but our second print run's gonna come. It's gonna come." So, yeah, like there's just a huge amount of interest in the title, and so we're so happy it's resonated so widely with so many people.
Yeah. There was, I think, there was an online retailer from Australia who did end up stocking your books, Gateway Manga and Comics. Is that right?
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes,
yeah.
yes.
So they came to our booth at the con, and we talked a lot about alternative and bonds for a while. Yeah, and I think they ended up. I was so happy to see that the book is in their catalog. So yeah,
That's awesome.
yeah, awesome, Varun.
Oh, this is tough. I guess the one I'd really want to talk about is a Path from Tanuki Temple by Shinkaro Koma.
Mm,
This is the one I personally selected myself on my first trip to Comidia last year.
mm,
And what really stood out to me with it is that all the art is done in full color and completely analog. Um, the creator Koma Sensei uses like a kind of mix of like crayons and acrylic markers to kind of really create this very beautiful retro like look that also feels like that it has like a lot of depth in terms of like the artwork. It looks like honestly nothing else that I've seen from like a colored manga, um, that is like released in Japan. And I think like too, it's just like a really nice, accessible, all ages story, which I feel like is very tough to come by with manga nowadays, especially like for something that can hit international all age audiences. Like the
mm.
main story is just about this young princess who kind of lives in like a mythical land, and she's like the princess of like the Tanukis in the area, and she decides to just go out on her own because she's kind of sick of just like living in her palace and like just being like completely isolated from the outside world, and she just wants to really just explore. And she just comes across like other people along the way that are just either like adventurers or people that are like trying to protect their homes, and they kind of just face off against like these random encounters of like technology or nature. Um, it's just like a very interesting read. It actually, in some ways, it reminds me a little bit of like a Ghibli story like Laputa, especially in the first volume,
Mm.
since they end up fighting a robot. um,
Wow.
but
Wow.
this one was like I think just like such a fun, comforting read, and I also was just very happy about like the localization we got on this, especially for the lettering, because like the sound effects and the a lot of the kind of hand drawn text in this is like very difficult to replicate. We had a bit of
Mm.
difficulty initially finding like a manga letter that could like really match it perfectly. But thankfully, we ended up bringing on Vanessa Satone, who is the manga letterer for One Piece.
Yeah, yeah,
um,
yeah.
so that
Wow.
ended up helping a ton. And honestly, I think of all our books is the one I'm most proud of. Like the final result so far, just because of like it's a book that I think I really wanted to get in the hands of more people, especially to people in like libraries and just more children as well, because I think it's just like a really fun, accessible read.
Mm.
It definitely
Amazing.
reminds me of like, and we were discussing kind of like things we could use as entry points for people who are interested in it. And one thing that it definitely reminded me of is like this old fashioned Super Nintendo RPGs, like and
Hmm.
of the sort because like she's gathering a party and they're going through different adventures and stuff. So and like Varun just sort of mentioned the fact that we did get a couple questions at some cons about manga for children, and like this book is even designed in a way the author even has a place where a kid could write their name on the cover, like, and I just found that really
Wow.
charming. So
Yeah.
Yeah, and
Yeah, yeah.
honestly, it's one of those titles too where like you would not find it easily if you weren't at Comidia. Um,
Mm.
and that falls into the category of a few of our different titles that we have, like Princess Da Huang or like one of our upcoming titles, Pipe Machine, where it's so
Mm.
outside of the realm of what would be traditionally published in the manga industry. Like full color manga itself is usually like very much a online publication thing. And let alone that, like you don't see that many that are aimed at children. Um,
Mm.
so it's like a very unique combination. And then when you put on like the fact that it's an analog drawn title on top of that, just makes it very
Mm.
unique. And
Mm.
so when initially Michael and I were reviewing it in the initial batch of books, I was pretty adamant from the start of like, yeah, we should go after this because like it's just something that yeah is truly unique.
Yeah. So amazing. Michael?
well, we discussed this a little bit before we started recording, but I mean the easy
Yeah.
answer would be since I worked on alternative, like essentially it's one of my first like professional credits. And as Sid mentioned, you know, right around the time we announced Manga Mavericks Books, so another thing we discussed off on Mike is that I kind of lost my job in the government. So like I'm in my 40s and I'm making this like transition from having a plushy a kind of plush office job to translating manga like instead of a hobby as like a career and all the things that come with it. So it came at a very appropriate time for me because like I've done like interviews and stuff and news, and that's been very kind of like I don't want to say low, not low priority, like yeah, low priority. Like it's the kind of thing where it's like I could do it or I could choose not to do it. But now it's like translating manga for the first time for like a publisher, and even though it's one I'm working with my friends, I still want to be professional about it and seeing the result of it. I got to meet the author in November, and that was like a
Wow.
whole. We have a signed copy between me and him, and like it is kind of life changing. It's just like I had a lot of the same doubts Rio had, which was kind of like, just am I going to be able to make a living doing this? Am I, you
Mm.
know, am I doing this for fun? Am I even good enough to do this? And
Mm.
having the reaction for it be every time I go to, like, we went to New York Comic Con and people were asking me to sign copies of it, and I'm just kind of like, I I didn't do anything. I just translated. I'm not the artist. I'm not that important in the scheme of things. But it's really humbled me in a way of saying, wow, people are really, when you tell a good story or have a good story, people resonate with it. And this being my entryway into working with Manga Mavericks and just getting translation. Now I'm getting translation jobs. Um, has just changed me in a way that I don't think I would have if I hadn't worked on Altered. And plus, I just really believed in the story. When it came time to, when we started getting contracts and it came time to decide, okay, what are you going to work on? Because obviously I can't work on everything. Um, Alternative was actually my second choice. And it's funny because
Wow.
like I'm getting to the manga that I like the most out of are and my original choice was Zikoku's Foreman.
Mm.
Like when Varun showed me Zikoku, I was like, yes, I really like how this looks. I want to work on this one. But I'm gonna reveal a little thing to people who may not know. So with Zikoku is both a light novel and a manga. And
Mm.
that wasn't the thing that I knew originally when Varun brought it back. So like it wasn't until like he got the files and we were looking through it. I'm like, wait, why? Where are the pictures? And um, he was like, oh no, it's light novel and manga. I was like, ah, no, never mind. I'm gonna sit this one out because something that I think that our readers need to understand is like translating a light
Mm.
novel is a completely different like experience and requires a completely different set of skills than translating a
Mm.
manga. And as much as I love Zikoku's Foreman, it's my favorite one to talk about whenever we go to conventions or whenever I have to. We're at conventions, we're at the booth. That was the one I love selling up the most because I find it the funniest. It has the greatest artwork, but it's got the funniest it's got a funny like a relatable kind of like a description as well. Like it's about a guy who I love the phrase I come up with it. He had to go down to go up because he died and became a foreman. So he got promoted to be a foreman only after he went to hell. So he had to go down to go up. Um, and about these and the fact that he's building hell architecture with a bunch of other lazy kind of ne'er do wells. It's just like it's such a funny premise and it has such awesome artwork. But getting back to what I was saying, translating a light novel is just a whole different like I'd almost have to say that's something like not to say manga translation is easy either. I mean, it isn't, but LN translators are a rare breed, especially people who can do both and do them really well. So I just
Mm.
didn't
Mm.
have like the confidence I could give Zikoku the translation that it deserved, especially since my
Yeah.
background is mostly in translating manga. So when we got when we got the drafts back and we were able to kind of read through it, I was just like, wow. Um,
Yeah.
the translation is amazing for this. The manga is amazing for it, and it's just a wonderful, just it's just a really good story. I feel like that. I'm so glad that when we go to conventions now, people really resonate
Yeah.
with it because it feels like the kind of thing that online it was doing fine, but when people actually can see the book, we learned that in New York Comic Con last year, when people could see Zikoku, that became like it became like the more popular seller out of the ones that we had. And
Nice.
it's just really, I just really think that Nine Banta does a wonderful job with the artwork and just how enthusiastic they are in supporting us. I think out of all our artists, I think we could easily say that Nine Banta is like one of the most supportive.
Mm.
Yeah, and the
Mm.
lead up to the launch of the books, Banta like posted like every day for a month with like a piece of original art and just talking about the series and promoting the English release. And they provided us with like just so many pieces of artwork too, for the series for use for promotional purposes. I think like 80 plus pieces of artwork, and we've been able to use two of those for like one for a bookmark and one for like a poster that we give out at the conventions. And yeah, like people really respond to the art of Zigoku's Torment of My Banta's art, and like it's awesome to just be able to pitch the books in person and to like see people really drawn into the art, and just as they read the book, the humor of it, like it's so funny. And I think that the format of it, switching between manga and light novel sections, you get
Yeah,
often two different perspectives on the same events through that, and it's a
yeah,
really
yeah.
really intriguing way to develop the story and the world.
It's a very, very interesting format for sure. Yeah, definitely. Awesome. I've been meaning to ask since the beginning, like, what are some of the biggest challenges you guys have faced while translating some of these books? And I think you already touched upon that a little bit, Varun and Michael. But it's for all three of you. Like, what are some of like the biggest, trickiest things that you've seen while translating uh, these books?
I think one of the, and I mean, I'll, this is kind of dovetailing into another thing, but I will answer the question. One of the nice things about working with the artist directly is that we can ask questions when something doesn't seem clear. Something you wouldn't get so much if you're working with like a through a another agency to work through these publishers. So, for example, with Alternative, with the page that Sid mentioned earlier, it was overlapped with the art. So if I didn't have access to the author, that would have been really difficult to work on because it's like a lot of text. It's also with artwork and figuring out what's being said here or there. Um, but yeah, that's one of the really nice things about having access to the author that we can kind of ask, okay, do you what how should we approach this?
Hmm.
So that would have been, at least in my experience, one of the ones I've translated, that would have been like one of the toughest things I ran into.
Hey, by the way, welcome to the stream, Vaughn.
Hey, how's it
Hello.
going?
Ooh.
Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet y'all as
So,
well.
yeah, for everybody, Vaughn is the creator of Zara and Jean Occult Investigations. That's a crowdfunding campaign we're launching right now, right here at Comix.one. But Vaughn, I'd love to for you to meet the team Manga Mavericks. They've been publishing these fantastic books for last year, and then been podcasting about them for almost a decade now. So, oh no, actually more than a decade now, right?
Well, we just celebrated 10 years, so now like a decade and 2 weeks.
Nice, congratulations.
Thank you.
Awesome. Yeah. Sorry, finish your thought, Michael. We were just talking about some because they translate indie manga from Japanese to English. We were talking about some challenges, uh, while translating these stories.
Yeah, no, so yeah, I guess it's less of a challenge and more just a thing that's like really nice about being able to work with the author directly.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. That's probably the best way to do it as well, right? Like you one of the hardest parts of any, and I don't want to speak for you because you're the expert here, Mike. But the hardest part of any translation is understanding the feeling and understand getting the essence of what the author is trying to capture in that scene or in that moment, right? And if you're able to work with them directly, I think that's what you're able to capture probably the best.
Yeah, like it's always a fight between, I don't want to say fight, but it's always like a struggle between intent and what's on the paper. Because we nowadays you get those translation purists who are like it has to be one on one, exactly every letter has to match what was in the original script. And to me, my whenever I translate, I always say that if the target audience doesn't understand what's being said, and it's a failed translation, even if it's technically correct. um and that's a thing that I've kept in mind when working on any translations, is just keeping in mind how would I speak, especially in the manga where it's like usually a thing where it is entertainment. So we have to think about person would speak amongst their friends, how or how best like you match the language of the contextual narrative that it's in. So that's the thing that like I'm one that likes to do a little bit of like not necessarily localization, but like I like to make it sound more natural when I'm working on translations. So I mean, sometimes some people have accused me of saying having a little bit of a sarcastic voice, and I guess that's just within me innately. But and I try to tone it down a bit. But like that's a thing that I always think about when I'm working on translation.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, makes a lot of sense. Makes a lot of sense. Anything you guys might want to add, Varun and Siddharth?
I think
Yeah.
some of the other challenges that often come up, and I'm not a translator and I don't know Japanese, but like in working like kind of editorial capacity and then just like observing like conversations going on between our team, a lot of what comes up is there was a title that we have coming up that is, based on, the Sinbad legend. And so there are a lot of Arabic references in the book, and so there's a lot of conversations and research that has to go into like, are the translations accurate? Are the use of these terms accurate as how was used by the author in the original Japanese? Would it make sense to translate? Do we translate these terms into English? Do we retain them in Arabic? So a lot of conversations have to go into that about like, okay, what is like the most accurate in preserving the original intent, and then are there some terms or is there some usages in the original text that may not make sense or may have been like mistakenly used by the original author that we might want to reach back out to him to ask like, hey, could we make like an adjustment to this? So this is where like having a direct connection with the author really helps in order to like be able to consult with them for these decisions. But I think that title, Sinbad, is an example of like a lot of additional research that also has to go into translation to not only like Japanese to English translation, but also looking into other cultural references and other language translations to make sure those are preserved as well in the translation.
Yeah, I think like from the production side, there's a lot of like just moving parts in terms of like understanding the intent of the translation, but then also like keeping a consistent style and formatting guide for all your releases, which is something I think we initially kind of struggled with. Kind of when we were starting out, we didn't really think too much about having localization style guides, but as we kind of went further in, and now we have like a team of like essentially 30 plus localizers working on like multiple projects in tangent, it's become more like important for us to be able to like actually organize how different things should be translated and how certain things should be formatted on the page. Are we using the metric system? Are we using the imperial system? Um, and kind of just like making sure it's as understandable to the English reader as possible, but to kind of what Sid and Michael have said, still covers the intent of what the Japanese creator wanted. At the end of the day, these like stories are the creators' babies in a way, and they're putting a lot of faith in us as a publisher to be able to release it in English. So we want to be able to stay true to like their original versions as much as possible, while also making it uh, very accessible to an English reader without them having to like dig through for a bunch of context.
Makes sense. Makes sense. Awesome. We're coming close to time for this stream. We will hop on. We'll be in the same studio, but we'll join on another stream very shortly. We'll start a different one for the launch of Zara and Jean. But before we go, I want you guys to plug your podcast, plug your store, plug your website. Uh, tell the audience about Manga Mavericks and where everything can be found.
Absolutely. Thank you for having us on the show. It's been awesome talking with you and just sharing our stories and our experiences, like working on Manga Mavericks books. Like, yeah, it's just amazing to reflect on like how we got into manga as fans, and then now how we're here 20 years later from when we get into it. In Waruna Mind's case, longer for Michael, and then in doing like the podcast for over 10 years now we're publishing manga. It's just a crazy journey. But yeah, if folks enjoyed hearing us talk today, we do have a podcast, Manga Mavericks Podcast, that you can find pretty much wherever you can listen to podcasts. Again, we're a podcast that discusses manga as both a medium and as an industry. We're on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher. We're everywhere you listen to podcasts. You can find us online. Our X handle is at manga_Mavericks, and we're also on Blue Sky. We're on Instagram. We're on YouTube, youtube.com/Manga Mavericks, where we post excerpts of the podcast as well as videos of our panels and trailers for Manga Mavericks books. And you can also find like exclusive podcast content on our Patreon, patreon.com/mangaarts, as well as our Substacks, our Manga Arts Plus newsletter, where we have a paid $5 tier where you can get monthly exclusive bonus podcasts as well as early releases like podcast episodes. So yeah, we have like a lot of stuff on there in terms of exclusive passes. We have like 60 plus, having done that for over 5+ years, in addition to the main show where we've done like over 400 podcasts, I think, across just the main Manga Arts podcast, as well as sub series of Manga Arts, like Manga Arts and movies, where we talk about movies. We talk about some TV shows. We talk about anime. We also have a lot of related podcasts to Manga Mavericks. Like I talked about how Yatsu is my favorite series. I have a Yatsu podcast called Lum Squad that you can find on socials at Lum_Squad, and on pretty much every other podcast feed, or just the wonderful Lucky World of Takashi's Yatsura. But we also do a Demon Slayer podcast. We have a podcast dedicated to Shigakakon manga called Saturday Night Shoggy. So you can find a lot of podcasts in our podcast network, like just on all the podcast feeds. But also you can find everything that we do on our website, mangamavericks.com, where we host our podcast and we have a lot of editorial content. We have reviews, we have interviews, we have a lot of convention coverage. So check out our website for all sorts of discussion and reviews and content from everything we're doing in the manga space, as well as updates on Manga Mavericks Books, which you can find all our titles on our online store, store.mangaarts.com, as well, of course, on Comix.one for the digital ebooks as well, as well as other platforms. We're on Amoy and Global Comics, and a variety of other places as well. But if for our direct store, you can find that store.myros.com. And yeah, Varun, is there anything else that you want to let folks know about of where to find Manga Mavericks Books and Manga Mavericks?
I think you covered everything, to be honest. I mean, we'll be at a lot of events coming up, primarily in the US. And you can find me on Twitter at VLordGTZ, as well as Blue Sky and Instagram. Though I usually just post about like what manga I'm reading or what movie I'm watching, or random hints at what we're gonna announce soon. We basically have enough licenses to cover the rest of the year at this point.
And
we
years
have
beyond.
a lot cooking. Yeah, we have a lot cooking.
Absolutely.
Amazing.
I guess you can find me. I should mention you can find me personally online at Lumnomiasha, a variety of platforms like X and Letterboxd and AniList. And yeah, you can catch updates of like what I'm doing when I'm at conventions. I'll often do threads, and on Letterboxd I post some of my movie reviews. So yeah, you can find me on those places. And if you like the art I make, the animation illustrations I do, the thumbnails that I've drawn for the Manga Arts podcast, you can find that on my Instagram at StarArtWorks.
Awesome.
Oh, and
Michael?
Yes, you can find me at Kirobon on Twitter, KIIRBOBON. That's a personal Twitter. I'm a huge Bomberman fan, so that's usually what I'm talking about lately. Thank you, Konami. But my real stuff's at WSS Talkback on Twitter, Instagram, and Blue Sky. I run Strict Algorithm LLC, where we promote manga, we interview manga artists and people in the industry. We also do manga news, a ton of it. The most recent thing we have up is a review of a new Shonen Sunday series, Futari Bus, or Bus for Two. So our reviews go into more than just, hey, this is good. We go into the manga because complete history of things that they've released before their current series. So you should check that out. Um, Again, a lot of stuff is intertwined with Manga Mavericks, though we do have I do a podcast with Colton, the Manga Mavericks co-host, about Dragon Ball, called Another Day, Another Adventure. So we're essentially, if Goku was in it and it was animated, we're going to talk about it. So this is a long time commitment. um, we also,
especially since there's more animated Dragon Ball comics.
yeah, it never stops. We keep thinking we're at the bottom, and Goku tosses us another shovel and says you can get stronger. Yeah, we have that. I'm also doing another podcast with Colton, the Anime Club, where we're watching Hajime no Ippo, and this is my first time watching it, so I'm really enjoying it. More than I thought I would. And yeah, as Sid mentioned, we have Saturday Night Shogi, which I talk about my favorite publisher in the world, Shogakukan. And yeah, that's generally where you can find me.
Amazing.
Oh, right. I
Amazing.
shouldn't forget that we also do translate things for Nyuhi, Komodo's manga service. So like if you're on our social media, you will see it. But like you should definitely check that out. It's a really cool place, and they're giving us work to translate manga, so I feel like I have to like shut them out a little at least. But no, they're cool. I really enjoy some of the manga that we've been able to work on, like Discard Palace and Goa. So you should definitely go read those.
Amazing. I think that's it. That's it for this stream. We'll end the stream and start a new one. And see you everyone in just a little bit. Yeah. Thank you everyone for tuning in, and thank you, Team Manga Mavericks, for this lovely show.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you. Yeah.